This is the first course in a series of trainings on basic project management skills. I want to, oh, you can't hear me? Hold on. Maybe this is better. We're still in circuit breaker mode here in Singapore. So this is the first course in a series on basic project management skills. And this particular one is dealing with how we organize the work scope, and in particular, the use of a very particular tool called the WBS, or the work breakdown structure. So if we look at how we develop a plan for our project, first we have to initiate, we have to look at what is the project objectives, why are we doing this work, and then we have to say, okay, what's the scope? What is it that we're going to do? And then we can define the specific requirements, we can talk about how we're going to deal with the project scope, and then we can start to process the duration. How long is it going to take us? How much it's going to cost, and how much resources. And all this put together, we get a plan for our project. But it really basically always starts with looking at the boundaries. And one good tool that we can use to set out boundaries is what I call an is-not list. Very, very simple. And many very experienced project managers are very good at the left-hand side, saying what is in their project, their initiative, the job that they're going to do. And that's relatively easy if you sit down and think about it. But it's almost as important, perhaps more important, to put down the right-hand side. What is not in this work we're going to do? This could be work that will be done by others. This could be work that is just not something we're going to do at this time. And it's very, very useful to think about this so that we don't later get into arguments with our other stakeholders about, oh, we should have been doing this, we should have thought about. No, we thought about that and we listed it down, and here it is. This is our list of what we're not putting into this project. And it's very useful when we prepare this list to get the other stakeholders to sign off on it, to acknowledge that this is what we're going to do, and these are the things that we're not going to be doing. All right, so our is-not list. And one of the things that we always have when we look at a project are what we call the triple constraints. Three sides. The bottom, the base of it is the scope, and this defines what will be done. On the other side, we have time, how long it's going to take us to do it. Usually we use a schedule, whether it's a Gantt chart or a critical path schedule or some sort of even more exotic kind of scheduling tool. This is basically what we are looking at. And the third side are the resources. What resources? Now, many people label this as cost, but in some organizations and some efforts, we don't actually measure it in monetary terms. We might measure it in hours or days or weeks of effort, but it's resources. On a really big project, yes, we may measure monetary costs. We may also be looking at quantities of materials, equipment, things like that, but it can all be, of course, turned into dollars, yen, yuan, whatever currency, baht, rupees, whatever we're using, right? So these triple constraints. And what's important to remember here is once we've established this, once we've said, yes, this is what our project is going to look like, if we change one, either one or both of the other two will change. And a little bit more about that in another lecture when we talk about managing our triple constraints. But let's now focus on the scope. And this is really where we need to start. Before we start talking about how long it's going to take us and how much it's going to cost, we really have to be very, very clear about what it is. What is it we're going to do? And when we talk about scope, we can look at two components, right? One is called the product scope, the deliverables. What actually are the product, service, or result that we're expecting to have at the end of our work, at the end of our project. It's going to talk about the content and the requirements of that product, service, or result. And usually it's going to be defined with some sort of specifications, drawings. If we're talking about engineering work, a bill of materials, you might use a design brief. There's any number of ways that we can define that scope. And of course, something else we'll talk about in another training will be progressive elaboration. So we don't have the full definition at the beginning, but we start off and we can add more and more detail to it. The other side of the scope is what we call the project scope. And this is where we define the activities that have to be performed in order to produce the product, right? So this is the work, the effort. What is it that we have to do? And the key tool here is to use the work breakdown structure, the WBS. And this is a very, very powerful tool to help us visualize and organize the work that we have to do. And later on, we can use that to define resources needed, time, schedule, and we can use it in other things. We can use it in risk management, many, many different areas. So the definition in the PMBOK Guide, the Project Management Body of Knowledge, published by the Project Management Institute, they define the work breakdown structure as a deliverable-oriented grouping of project elements that organizes and defines the total work scope of the project. Each descending level represents an increasingly detailed definition of project work. Whew, what a mouthful. But a very good definition if we look at it in detail. Now, many of you are maybe like your eyes are rolling back in your head going, what does this mean? I'll give you an example, all right? I'll give you an example. What do we eat on Thanksgiving and Christmas and other celebration times in the US at least? We have a turkey, right? Now, how do you eat a turkey? You don't just pick up the turkey and swallow it whole. It doesn't happen like that, right? No, can't be done, right? It's too much to eat. So the turkey is brought out, and what happens? The turkey is then carved, right? Carved into white meat, dark meat, legs, whatever. And then it's put on a platter and it's passed around, and you choose which you like to eat. Do you like the light meat? Do you like the dark meat? Do you want a drumstick? Whatever you like, you take. And again, you don't swallow that piece whole. You cut it up into bite-sized pieces. And this is what a WBS is doing. It's cutting up that big turkey of a project into bite-sized pieces that we can handle, that we can digest, that we can look at it and say, okay, I'll need so many hours of work on this, and I'll need these resources, and I'll need to spend this much money. We can define all of that much, much easier when we have the turkey all carved up into bite-sized pieces. So this is a WBS. And here we are enjoying the turkey. All right, so let's look at some of the elements that are in the WBS. The lowest element on any branch is called a work package. Now you can think of, I like to use the analogy that a WBS is a bit like an upside down tree, and the leaves are where the work gets done. A tree, the leaves change sunlight into chlorophyll and allow the tree to grow. And this is, let's not take the analogy too far, but you go from leaves to smaller branches to larger branches to big, huge branches down to the trunk, right? So this is the idea, but it's upside down when we have the WBS. So the work packages, the lowest level at any branch, where we can assign and monitor work. We can assign this to an individual or a small group, and we can say you're in charge to someone, and we can then check progress. How much effort has been expended, how much money has been done, how much progress has been made. And it's also where we can, before we do that, where we can actually estimate time, effort, cost, and so on. And this is a very, very useful tool. If we're looking at doing a network schedule, of course, all of those work packages become the elements in the schedule. Above that, or several levels above that, we can always roll up the levels into what we call cost accounts. And this is where we may be reporting to management. So we don't have to tell management about every individual work package, but in a particular grouping, then we can add them all together and talk about progress, what's been done, what needs to be done yet. And we can also have planning packages when we're looking at doing our schedules, and we'll get into more detail about scheduling in another episode, but this is where we will talk about, okay, we know we've got future work, but we don't know the details of it, so we're going to have a planning package for that. So this is just an example of a WBS. You can see how it's a tree structure, right? We've got the whole project in XYZ. It happens to be for a building, so we've broken it down into 4 areas: design the building, site preparation, interior work, and building construction, right? So we can break it out, and then we can break those down into smaller and smaller pieces. The ones in the yellow here are all work packages. If you notice that the one right almost at the top is a work package, because that's going to actually be given out to some outside entity. It's going to be given, as it says here, it's a design build element. So we're going to give this to another company to do, and for us it's a work package. For them it's a whole project, and they would then have to break it all down in detail to do their work. So where do we get the WBS from? Well, we could sit around with our team and do brainstorming, right? Decide what are the things that we're going to have to do for this project, and come up with the different elements. It's probably easier to start with a template. There aren't too many projects that haven't been done by somebody somewhere before, hopefully within our organization, and we can go and look at a template and say, yeah, okay, let's use this as a guideline. We can look at those past projects, but we do have to remember that every project is unique, so we're going to have to do some modification. How is it similar? How is it different? And what do we need to do? We can also go and get expert opinion, either internal or external, and ask them what they think we should be doing, how we should be doing it, how it should be structured. I have worked with external experts that have done this for organizations that I've worked for. The thing you got to remember here is it's their opinion. It may be different than the way your organization works or that you want to work. So you always have to take it with a grain of salt and discuss it with them and make sure that you're not being forced to work in a way that they think you should work rather than the way that you think you should work. And of course, the system tutorials. If you're using any sort of project management software like Microsoft Project, or I forgot the name of the other one. These will also have samples. Again, these are someone else's idea. They're useful as a guideline, but doesn't mean you have to follow it rigidly. Take it, adjust it, reuse it, repurpose it for your project or initiative. So, the step-by-step. Right? First thing is you have to have a good understanding, make sure everybody on your team has a good understanding of the project goals and objectives. And if these haven't been defined, wait, you're getting ahead of yourself if you're trying to do a WBS. Make sure that the goals and objectives have been defined and agreed on, signed off by the stakeholders. And then you want to talk about your high-level breakdown. And there's a number of different ways that we can break down that highest level in the WBS. Typically, it could be done by deliverables, by components. It could be done by life cycle stages, very common in the software industry. It could be done by functional breakdown, much more common in engineering works, right, where you talk about the different departments, the different functions that are going to be involved. It could be a geographical breakdown. If you're going to be working with elements of your organization or people you're going to be collaborating with that are geographically dispersed, you might want to organize that first level by those geographical locations. There's many ways you can do it. It's your choice and whatever suits you best. And of course, do remember that if you have a project sponsor, that you need to take it to them and make sure that they agree with that before you start. I've actually seen projects where they went and they did a life cycle breakdown, and then when they had it all done, they went to the sponsor. The sponsor says, "Oh, shouldn't it be by functional departments?" All the work had to be redone. Not good, not good. And then you start to decompose those high-level components, whatever they are, into the next level of components, right? As we said, taking that big turkey and carving it up smaller and smaller pieces. Continuing, number 4, to decompose the components until we reach a level where we can estimate the work, assign the work, and monitor the work. And this is really the right level. People say, how many levels? Well, really depends on the size of your project. My background is building construction. I've worked on really huge projects where the WBS may go down 15 levels or more, right? Down to that level of detail. On a smaller project, 4 or 5 may be enough, right? It's not an IKEA assembly instruction, but it has to be enough detail that people know who's supposed to be doing what, and you can estimate the resources needed to do the job. And then after you've broken it down, you want to review it. You want to review it first with your core team. Also then with your sponsor, maybe your customer if you're doing it with work under contract, and other key stakeholders, not everybody, to confirm 2 things. One is completeness. Make sure you haven't missed anything. And the second is to get buy-in. And this is very, very important, especially with your team. Now, I've seen in many situations the project manager sits down at her or his computer and does the WBS all by themselves. And then they send it out to the team. And the team looks at it and says, oh, looks okay, must be okay, project manager did it, okay. And then they come back 2 weeks, a month later, and they say, you know what you forgot in your WBS? Notice the language, you forgot your WBS. But if you do it as a team and have everybody work on the preparation, and then you write it up, type it up nicely, send it out, and then they get it and they say, wait a minute, didn't we discuss, didn't we agree, shouldn't we do it this way? Difference in language. We agreed, we discussed versus you forgot. Very, very useful to do the WBS with a team. All right, so why? What's it all about? The WBS is really the basis of our project planning and our project control. I mean, without it, it's going to be very, very difficult to think about how we're going to organize and run our project. We said the work packages, the lowest level, where we assign the work, where we track the work, where we estimate the work. And really the WBS is probably one of the most critical tools that we're going to have for doing our project planning, our scheduling, our budgeting. We also use it for risk management. We can go back and look at our WBS and say, what risks are associated with doing this work package? We'll talk more about that when we talk about risk management. Right? And the thing is, if we miss anything, if we miss it out in our WBS, the schedule may be unrealistic, overly optimistic because we forgot that we had to do something, and of course the budget, the resource allocations may not be sufficient. That's going to be big trouble. So I hope you found this WBS useful. If you've got any questions, please send them in. You can see the address down below, and I thank you for watching this. Good night.